Hello everyone and welcome to our JavaScript boss fight game, video 2. So hopefully that intro was a bit interesting. But basically we're going to be working on our second part of our JavaScript boss fight game. As you can see, we have our splash screen right here. And I hope that you've made a really cool looking website right here, right? Don't be like me and just do this, right? Make a cool looking website so that the player knows the lore, the story behind your game, as well as the controls. You probably don't know the controls yet, so don't worry about that right now. Just add some filler text for now, right? Make your website look good. Then here also add like a cool looking background screen with different font sizes and all of that. You can figure that out. You guys are good programmers right now, so I'm not gonna worry about that. When you click start game, we see no background image. There's no music. It's kind of boring, right? So I'm gonna see no music. So what we're gonna do today, let's list it out in 4 steps. The first step is that we are going to, of course, do a little bit of changing of our code for the first week, right? There were a few things we don't need and a few things we need to add. For example, we need to add a background image and sounds. I'm not going to go over how to do that. You should know how to add your background image and sounds, okay? The next thing we're going to do is we are going to be creating a player class. So in this video, we are going to be focusing on making the player. So we're going to be, first of all, we're going to write an actual instance of the player class and show where exactly we're going to update it. Then we're going to actually create our player class, right? And describe how we're going to construct it, describe its methods. And then finally, we are going to, add movement to the player and check for wall collisions, right? So let's get right into it. I'm going to be adding the sound in the backdrop real quick, and you can see what that looks like. So, as you can see, I've created up here, I've created a new stage 1 background image, right? And I've created also a stage 1 music, so background and music. As soon as I pause the start music, I'm going to play the stage 1 music, and I am going to actually go ahead and create an else if statement right here. Else if screen type equals stage 1, because remember, we're moving to stage 1 now. We need to draw our stage 1 image, stage 1 background, okay? And as soon as we do that, if we launch our game and press start, as you can see, we have our dark cavern right here, which looks pretty cool, and we have our music, which is going to be like very fast paced, if you can hear this. Okay, one last thing before we start is, and it's very important, we were originally going to keep track of delta time. This would make our game run the same speed on multiple devices, but this is actually a little bit complicated, so I am going to scratch it. Okay, so you do not need the delta time logic that we were going to add beforehand. Okay, but make sure you have everything else. Make sure you have the music and all of that. Now let's get started with actually creating our player constructor. Okay, so we've created an empty player class. Okay, so this is a good way of creating classes. You think, what are the things we need to do with our player? So we know we're gonna have to construct our player. Every single class needs a constructor, or like the def init method in Python. Then we have to update the player, like whenever it moves left or right, we need to check to see if they're pressing the arrow keys, right? That's checking movement. That's why we need an update function. And finally, we need a draw function to, of course, draw the sprite. Okay. So what I did here was I said let player 1, or I said, sorry, not let, but var, okay? And the difference between let and var is that, var makes it so that you can initialize it with, nothing, and it's a global scope, but let is only like a local scope. And if you don't know what that means yet, don't worry about it. Just use var for player 1, because we're going to, at first, it's not going to be equal to anything. Because we're only going to set it equal to something once we start the game. Once we start the game, we're going to have a new player, okay? So player 1 equals a new player. Now, as you can see, we have a lot of parameters, right? And this might be overwhelming, but let's break this down, okay? So let me add a comment, okay? So basically, 400 and 500 are going to be the X and Y position of where the player is located, right? Simple enough. Then we're also going to need the width and the height of the player, right? To see how big we want to make the image spread. Then, of course, we need what the image is going to be. So we're going to call, icon, right? So this attribute will be the icon, the image that the player will have whenever we draw the player, Then the next one will be speed. What is speed? Speed is basically, how fast it moves left or right. So if we increase, this to 20, it's going to move 2 times as fast left and right. And what we're going to do is we're only going to make our player move left and right. I'm not planning on making it move up or down, because I want you guys to figure that out on your own, right? If you want to do that. Now the final thing is very confusing. So let's break this down, right? This is an array of 2 numbers, right? And these 2 strings, right? And make sure you have the quotes on them, represent the left and right arrow keys. So if you look at your keyboard, right? Like for example, an Arabic keyboard has different, characters on them. So we can't just say, left and then right, right? So what JavaScript does is it assigns key codes to certain buttons on your computer, right? And in this case, the right arrow key is 39 and the left arrow key is 37. Let's say we wanted to also do up and down, right? So we could say the left arrow key is 37. I might be wrong, but I think the up arrow key is 38. The right arrow key is 39. And then the down arrow key is 40, I think. Okay? So this would be movement in terms of left, up, right, and then down. Or something like that. But for now, we are only going to use left and right because that's where our character is going to move. Okay? Hopefully this makes sense on what constructors we're going to have. One more thing I actually forgot to do was, so if you look right here in our images, this is the sprite we're going to be using. Let's see, player1.png, right? This is the sprite we're going to be using. Make sure your sprite is transparent. If you're having trouble getting sprites, you can ask us and we can help you with that. But yeah, like I was saying, we need to actually, where is it? Yeah, our variables right here. And make sure you have comments to keep track of what is what. So we need to create an image for a player. So let player image equals new image, and then we're going to have to set its source equal to images slash, what was it, player1.png? Was that the case? Okay, makes sense. And player1 image, player1 image, player1 image, like so. And yeah, so as you can see right now, if you run our code and if you start the game, our player won't be there because we don't have anything in the draw function, the update function. We don't even have a constructor. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill these things out. Okay, so if you remember, the attributes of this player will be the x, the y, the width, the height, the image, the speed, and the movement array. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's construct this. Oh brother, that's a big constructor. But it's only big because we have this comment right here, right? And this comment will hopefully explain what each thing does. So x, y, width, height, icon, speed. All of these make sense, I've already explained them. Movement, again, remember, represents L is the player's left key code and right is the player's right key code. And the reason why we're doing this is because let's say we want to create another player, right? We want to make this a 2-player game, but we want a key code to be A and D for WASD. If you don't know what those are basically, if in 2-player games you have the WASD keys and the arrow keys. So if you wanna make like A and D your arrow keys, then you pass in, different key codes, and you have to search that up. I don't know on the top of my head, sadly. Okay. And the final thing right here is we have a keys array. Okay, so let's take a look at the draw function before we do anything else. And by the way, if you didn't see this already, make sure that you have a else if right here, and you make sure that you call player1.draw and then player1.update. Okay, so these two functions must be called every tick. These are called ticks, or every frame that we pass. We need to update the player and we need to draw the player. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's look at the draw function, and then we'll get to the update function where we actually get to move a player. That's the exciting part. Yeah, and that's it. One line. We use the icon, right? This dot icon, and then we use the x and y, this dot x and this dot y to position it, and then we use the this dot width and this dot height to change the width and height. That's why we have so many parameters, right? Because this is like five attributes all at once, basically dictating how we're going to draw our player. And the good thing about classes is that we can have like 10 players, and we don't have to like recreate the player class. This class, all we have to do is literally, right here, say new player and then a whole bunch of attributes, right? It makes your life much easier when you have classes. Okay, now the update function. This is where you're going to be learning new JavaScript material, so pay attention. This is very important, a key concept in JavaScript in game development. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, if you don't get most of it, right? If you haven't gotten what I've been doing so far, don't worry about it. You can always just go back and rewatch the video or ask one of us. But this is key, okay? Make sure you get this, because this is going to be a key concept in making games, like I said before. We are adding an event listener to our document. What is an event listener? An event listener basically keeps track of events that our keyboard or mouse does, right? For example, when we press the S button, let's just say we have an S button on our keyboard, right? The key down, the event listener key down will trigger a function, right? So we have key down and then we have a function right here, right? And I'll get into the function in a bit, but basically this could be key up. Basically when we lift our fingers from a key, it could be mouse over. Like whenever we move our mouse around the screen, the event listener triggers this function right here, right? It could be mouse down, right? Whenever we click on our mouse, basically a function is triggered, right? There are lots of events that event listeners listen to, and once they find that event, right? Once you as the user trigger that event, either by pressing a key, moving your mouse, etc., it'll call a function. Okay, and this is the second part. So let's do this. We can literally pass in a function like this, right? So this could be, we could define a new method right here, but I decided, you know what, let's teach you guys, functions inside as parameters. So this entire thing, if you take a look at this, I'm going to actually, we can say this is X, right? And then we can have this function right here, right? Function X, like that. But what programmers like to do is, this is a really small function, right? So we can literally just pass in this function. So pay attention to how I've done this, right? So key down, comma, and then function E, and E is an event, right? So whenever we press key down, it's going to pass in an event, which is like what key we pressed, okay? Now here's another confusing part. And again, I'm breaking this down. What is keys? What is this keys array holding? So what we're going to do now is we are going to basically say, okay, what key are we pressing? Are we pressing the up arrow key? Which is, by the way, the up arrow key code I think is 38, right? So if we are pressing the up arrow key, this dot keys 38 will be equal to true. So the position in this array of 38 will be equal to true. Everything else will be equal to false. Right? Let's say we press the left arrow key, then 37 will be equal to true. Let's say we press the mouse or like M, right? Let's say it has a key code of 23. So if we press M, which has a key code of 23, which I'm not sure, by the way, I'm making this up, right? Then we set it to true. Okay, this is important because when this is true, in our update function, and I'll show you what we're going to do in a second in our update function. But basically, this array is keeping track of what keys are being held at this moment, okay? And then console.log, I'm basically just keeping track of what's here. We actually don't need this. I was having an error before when I was coding this, so I just use console.log. And you can use console.log to, print out useful information. Now, this is another important part, .bind this. This basically makes it so that, this function right here that is, keeping track of the keys array and updating it will be bound to the player class. Okay. So if you don't understand what this is a bit confusing. So just make sure you have this. If you want a more in-depth explanation, then please feel free to message us on the YCW Discord. Okay, now let's take a look at this key op. Again, this should be, I've already explained this, so hopefully it makes sense. But instead of actually adding to the array, we are deleting the keys from the array whenever we do key up. What's key up? Imagine I hold down the arrow key, right? When I hold down the arrow key, this dot keys at position 37 will be true, right? But then when I release my finger from the key, that will trigger the key up function, which will basically make my arrow disappear, okay? I might link an animation down in the description just to make things a bit more clear. But basically imagine this. Let's say we're holding the F, G, and H keys together. Then, in the array, there are 3 things that are true. As soon as we release our fingers from F, now there are only 2 things that are true. Let's say we release all of our fingers from F, G, and H. Now, everything in the keys array is false, right? So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an explanation. I try to give you as many explanations as possible, but if it still doesn't make sense, I'll try to link an animation. And if it still doesn't make sense, then just take my word for granted. Now, in the update function, basically we're checking to see if the key is being held. 37. What is 37? 37 is the left arrow key, right? So we're checking to see if the left arrow key is being held. If it's being held, we again have to make sure that our wall collision, we're not colliding with a wall. If we're colliding with a wall, we are not going to move, right? We don't want to move off the screen. So we check for the wall collision. And then if, we are colliding with a wall, so if we are colliding with a wall, this won't run. But if we are, then we're going to basically, move our character backwards. So basically this .x, we are going to subtract it from the speed. So we're going to move it backwards. And this is the same thing, except for the right, okay? Wow, that was a big explanation. I hope you understand that. Next, we are going to move on to the check wall collisions. You might have thought that this might be an inbuilt method, but it's not. We have to create our own check wall collisions method, which I'm going to show you in a second. It's very simple, actually. So before I get started, I just want to show you that the sprite is in fact instantiated at the middle, right here, as you can see. And towards the ground, and it has a decently, small size compared to the boss that we're going to be making next video. And now we're going to be showing you how it moves, okay? This is key. So, right now, let's say check wall collisions didn't do anything. I'm going to delete everything, right? Let's say it did not do anything. It's just going to always return true, okay? What's gonna happen? Let's see. Wait, scratch that. Something's up. Okay, so figured out the error. Basically, I forgot the CTX. I forgot to pass in the CTX, the context, right? And therefore, the drawing wasn't working, and that's why everything was glitched out. So make sure you pass the context, right? Yeah, that's what I forgot to do. So once I passed in the context right here, it should be working. And what I was going to be showing you was when we actually return true right here. What's going to happen? Let's start the game, and we can move outside the screen, which we don't want, right? So instead, what we're going to do is we are going to check for wall collisions. And how do we do that? Basically, we first see what the direction is, right or left. And you can also add in up and down. Very simple, right? You just do in the y direction. But basically, we return a boolean, right? So first, if the direction is right, we want to check if the rightmost tip of our character is touching the right wall, or is away, greater than the right wall. So we check if the x plus the width, right? So the tip, the right tip, is less than the window width. Because if it's greater than the window width, then we're gonna, like, it's gonna pass the screen. So we return false. And in that case, the player doesn't move past the window, right? In the same sense, here we need to make sure that the X position, the leftmost tip, is greater than 0, right? Greater, it's past the left wall. And you can do the same thing in the Y directions too. And with this, we have our fully working player movement. So let's take a look, okay? I'm gonna also volume, you know. So we have our nice loading screen, and once you start, we can move around, collide with the walls, and dodge the boss's objects. Thanks for watching. In the next video, we are going to be focusing on the boss and how the boss will be basically the boss's mechanics, how it'll be shooting its bullets and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.